Hey there, all you loyal listeners, rabid readers, and all around fucking nerds. I'm your host, Troy, and we are back again with another episode of Homicide Atrocities. Today's episode is one of those Marvel milestone movements, the Korvac saga. This was really early on, I believe, like late 70s. It's sometime after the Reese-Rawl War, and several years before Infinity Gauntlet, but this is when Marvel started really hitting its stride with the cosmic stuff and like letting the readers know some crazy shit is out there. Um, the entire collection that I have is Thor Annual number 6, and then it's Avengers 167 and 168. They skip 169. That was a different story by Marv Wolfman, just like a one-off, and then it comes back for 170 through 177. So basically Avengers 167 to 177, and a Thor Annual number 6, and I'll get into the Thor Annual and why that's important. But I'm gonna be honest with you, when I started reading this, I wasn't 100% in. I was like, all right, this is cool and all, but towards the end of this comic, it fucking blew my mind, and I loved it, and I knew I immediately had to do an episode of it. Majority of the story is written by Jim Shooter. I think he actually did like the whole plot. There is some help. George Perez, which is the main illustrator, also has a credit as a writer. David Michelini, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name. He was doing like tons of Avenger stuff, tons of Iron Man stuff at the time. So I think that he helped with some of the scripting. Um, and also, like I said, George Perez was illustrator. There was also David Wenzel. Honestly, like back then, it wasn't one person did something. There was a lot of co-plotters. There were people who were writing scripts. But I do want to give Jim Shooter primary ownership of this story. I believe it was all him. So, like I said, a little bit of the backstory to the Avenger story takes place in Thor Annual number 6. This is an adventure where Thor, like, I think he like stops some terrorists in a hostage negotiation, and there's a bomb, a nuclear reactor that's going to go off, and for some reason, Thor and the reactor are teleported to the 31st century, and he meets Horvat, who at the time is Horvat the Machine Man. He had shown up previously. He and a bunch of his henchmen, I might get into them. They're whatever one offs. Uh, had fought, I believe, Doctor Strange and the Defenders previously. But anyways, his whole backstory is that he was a guy from the 31st century. I think he was actually from Earth, and at one time, this alien race called the Badoon had the like lizard people had taken over the Earth, and he kind of like betrayed his people and was like, "Fuck yeah, I'm smart, man. I'll be with these guys." And he was like given a bunch of responsibilities. Eventually, they turned him into like a living computer, and so he's a human from the top up, but from the bottom down, he's like a square computer. It's really not that cool looking. Um, Anyways, though, the Thor has an altercation with him because he has all these machines. He can fuck Thor up super easily. One of them, the teleporter, and so Thor is thrown out into space. For some reason, Thor is like frozen in space, even though in later in the story he can fly through space fine. But anyways, so he is frozen in space, comes up across the Guardians of the Galaxy, much like the beginning of Infinity War, where Thor is captured, not captured, but rescued from space by the Guardians of the Galaxy. But this is the year, whatever, 31st century. They don't say a specific year, right? So this is the Guardians in the future. They're not, Star Lord anymore. If you don't ever, if you've only ever read that version or only ever seen the movie, this actually is where Yondu is from originally, which is far different. And then he's like almost like a Native American type guy that believes in spirits and actually shoots his arrow with a bow. And then the rest of the Yardians are kind of one-offs. Other than Starhawk, who's important, he is kind of like a super cosmic being, like a man, pretty well much gifted the powers of a god. and he just knows everything. He's the one who knows, and he can fly, he can survive in space. He's a Superman, you know? The rest of them, I'm not gonna get into it. Honestly, some of them are actually featured at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the James Gunn movie. I think that was like sort of an homage to this version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but none of them matter except for Nikki, who is this chick who, like, as soon as she sees Thor, say that 5 times fast, she's immediately like, "Oh, hey, you want to go to my room and fuck?" I was like, Jesus Christ! And like later on, I think she meets someone else, and says like, "Oh man, being around Thor all day, doesn't that just turn you on?" I was like, "Oh my god, did women in the 70s have any opinions, um, other than fucking gods, I guess?" But anyways, yeah. So eventually, Thor teams up with the Guardians, and they raid this like wonder world that Horvat has created. Then they fight all the henchmen, and basically they fuck Horvat up. Starhawk and Thor tag team Horvat, destroy his machines. Um, Before they actually end up like fighting each other for a second, and them fighting each other destroys the machines, which destroys Horvat's power over them. And at the very last minute, he teleports away, and that sort of is like the end of the adventure. The Guardians send Thor back to the year 1977. Like literally, it's been like 10 hours since he disappeared, I guess. So that's how long this adventure was. But that basically, in a nutshell, Thor returns to his time. Horvat escapes, and the Guardians win the day, and that is Thor Annual number 6. That setup is needed though because Horvat is the main villain, and at the end of Annual number 6, he teleports off to where the same place that Thor is teleported. So he goes back in time to stop uh basically some hatch, like some whatever plot. I'll get into it a little bit. It's almost immediately abandoned, but what you need to know is at the end he really teleports back to where Thor teleports to. So that brings us to Avengers 167. At some point, Beast from the X-Men has joined the Avengers, and he's kind of not like the Beast that I've ever read before. He's kind of like a jokey asshole, doesn't take anything serious. um at the same time, as these events, no one knows that Tony Stark is Iron Man. Vision and Scarlet Witch are married and together. Uh, Captain America has lost his super soldier serum, so he's just a regular guy in the suit and has the shield. Wonder Man has joined the team. Wonder Man isn't seen a lot anymore. I think he became an actor at some point, but I don't really see him in a lot of comics anymore. The only thing notable about Wonder Man, his powers are that he like is basically Superman. Only I think he actually can fly, so I'm pretty sure he's just like basically Superman. He's insane. He like died, came back, separate from this world, and like just has tons of powers. Anyways, um another notable thing is not important to the story, but Wonder Man's personality was used by Ultron to create Vision, and that's sort of how Vision came to be, is from Wonder Man's soul. That's how he died, I believe. Anyways, not important to the story. Sorry that I went off. So, Avengers get like a distress signal from Shield out in space, and like, hey, some crazy shit's going out in space. Nick Fury says that, word for word, and it turns out that there's a super giant spaceship that's out in space, and the Avengers go check it out. Turns out that the ship is actually the Guardians of the Galaxy from the 31st century that was in Thor Annual number 6, and they have followed Horvat back in time to try to stop him, right? Stop him from what, you might ask? Well, one of the Guardians that I left out is Major Vance Astro. He uh, has no powers. I don't really know what his deal is. That's why I didn't mention him before. He doesn't really do anything. But he is alive in the 21st century. He is a young boy, And at some point, there's an accident. He's basically frozen for 1,000 years, wakes up in the future, and that's how he joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. I never read those comics. That's just like what I've gathered from the information. But what the Guardians think is Horvat has traveled back in time to kill a young Vance Astro. If he does succeed, then he's never frozen to go into the future to form the Guardians of the Galaxy to then team up with Thor and stop Horvat in the future. Standard time travel plot type stuff. So this is where the story is a little weird, right? And this is where it gets really interesting actually. So Ant-Man, who at this point is the Yellow Jackets, Hank Pym is with Van Dyke, or whatever her name is, the Wasp. And the Wasp is like running a fashion show. And in the audience is this guy who's just like blonde and built like a brick house. And he's just like wearing a weird tuxedo. But the only person that notices is another person. Like no one really cares. He doesn't say anything. And on the stage is this woman who's like, they have a couple different models doing runway stuff. And there's a model called Harina Walters, and that's what gets this blonde guy's attention. At the same time, a villain called the Porcupine, which I guess is a villain for Ant-Man, shows up to, I guess, like rob the fashion show, as that's a totally normal plot. And while Ant-Man and the Wasp, I mean Yellow Jacket and the Wasp, attack him, and also Darkhawk is there, who's a hero that I've literally never seen before. This blonde guy gets up and walks to Harina, reaches out his hand, doesn't say anything, and like she just sort of there's no need to speak. She feels his desire, and they just sort of teleport away unseen together. And like all the stuff with the Wasp doesn't really matter. That's the only thing that matters in this issue. Over the course of these several issues, there are a couple side stories that I don't think really matter. So I'm just going to sort of sweep them under the rug and tell you now. So like, there's a break in at Avengers Mansion, and it's this government agent named Henry Peter Urich who is upset that the Avengers Mansion security isn't up to par because it has a lot of government technology and a lot of government secrets and clearance levels. And basically through a couple issues, he like puts them on notice and then eventually revokes their status. Later on, it matters because now they can't use like the Quinjets, as they don't have air clearance. They can't get certain information because they aren't allowed to talk to Nick Fury anymore. um but ultimately I don't think it has anything to do with the story. Another one of the side stories that happens is that the bride of Ultron is like Yellow Jacket. I guess they had defeated Ultron previously, who was making himself a bride of Frankenstein style, and I don't know. They ship the body to the Avengers, and then she gets activated and like fights the Avengers for a second, and then she leads them to Ultron, which then there's a fight with Ultron, and Thor ends up like defeating Ultron's body, and it's like at this nunnery with all these nuns and stuff. It's really weird. The only thing that comes of that, though, is that the bride of Ultron joins the Avengers, and there's a little bit of some shit between Quicksilver and Vision, because Quicksilver's like, hey, this shit's a villain, like, and we're just letting any machine enter our ranks because he's still salty that his sister's fucking an android. It's like really weird and like out of place, like forced, I guess, bigotry towards androids for some reason. I don't know. Like I said, the only thing that comes of that is that she ends up joining the Avengers, which later has no like long term effect to the story. Now, the story that does matter is sprinkled throughout the issues. Um, Literally out of nowhere, Starhawk leaves the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians of the Galaxy decide to watch young Vance and protect him in case Korvac attacks. There's a couple moments where like the Guardians, like a bus is out of control and is gonna hit him, but they protect him, which is weird for the time. Spectrum is like, if they weren't there, would he have died? Does that mean that they were there the whole time? I'm not get into it. But Starhawk leaves the Guardians of the Galaxy and doesn't tell anyone where he's going. And he goes to this like just totally normal residential area in Forest Hills in New York State. And you don't even know it's him at first. It's just talking about this woman who's this beautiful woman who shows up at this random door. And a woman who opens the door is ends up being revealed as uh Harina Walters, who was the woman who was the beauty model, the fashion model that had left. And then you meet this guy, and you don't know who he is. They kind of just sort of refer to him as the enemy, the blonde, like hunty dude, who's actually wearing like a skin tight polo with like super short gym shorts, which is funny. I don't know if that was fashion at the time, or they just really wanted to dress the enemy as a totally like douchey looking neighbor guy. Anyways, like almost out of nowhere, the woman who shows up reaches out her hand and touches the enemy, who reaches out his hand, and it turns out that the woman is Starhawk, and the other guy is like turns into this cosmic guardian who has like godlike powers, and they meet on and do battle in the astral plane. Like they're fighting like in space. At the same time, there's like moments when they come back to the physical reality, and like Starhawk will punch him, and as he punches him, like literally the whole Earth like shakes, and even like Spider-Man notices something's going on. Like multiple people like scream out in pain, but like also the woman that Starhawk was an actual woman named Alita that I think he did love, because that's who's on the physical. So sometimes it's Starhawk on the physical plane, but then it shows like another time where the enemy punches Alita, the woman, in the face, and that causes Starhawk pain, because now Alita, who's not Starhawk, like has fear in her heart for Starhawk. It's seriously all over the place. It's really cool. It was like a little confusing to read, but it's such a cool battle between Starhawk and the enemy. It ends with the enemy like turning the atoms of Starhawk into like converting his ethereal spirit form into a basic substance which can be shredded by talons of naked energy. That's what they write in the book. And he basically rips the atoms of Starhawk apart and turns him into dust, only then to remake him exactly as he was, other than the ability to see who the enemy is. So it's basically like he defeated him by turning him into absolutely nothing, rebuilt him. Like this guy is the one who knows. Starhawk is almost a god with his abilities, and so he knows everything. He just knows everything. And the enemy is so powerful that he can make himself the only thing the Starhawk does not know. So then Starhawk like sort of goes away as he no longer knows why he's there, and he goes and he returns to the Guardians of the Galaxy and helps them watch young little Vance. And he really isn't seen until like the end, towards like issue 178 or something, or 177, when like the story's climaxing. But this battle is fucking nuts, and it makes you really interested in who the hell is the enemy, and why is he living in the middle of like the suburbs with short shorts on? What the hell's going on? So as the story's going on, and like I said, there's some stuff with the government agent, there's some stuff with Ultron. As this is happening, random heroes are disappearing. So like it shows a Hawkeye on a train with some guy named Two Guns, which I think is from like 1,000 years in the past, who's come here. I don't know his backstory. He basically disappears, which is what brings Hawkeye into the story. Um, But then you start seeing more people, like the bride of Ultron. After Ultron's defeated, she disappears. Captain America disappears. Then you start seeing like some stuff with the government agent happens, and Vision disappears. And Iron Man's on some like, yo, some shit is really happening. Like I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like this is like bad. This is really bad. This has to be a major priority. But things keep happening. Like there's another sub story where like some dude named Triton, who's a Namor villain, attacks some boats. And there's almost no point to it whatsoever. But Thor, Miss Marvel, who's not Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel are both like brought into the story after the fight with Starhawk and the enemy. Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel like sense something wrong on the cosmic level. When the heroes start disappearing, Iron Man puts out a call for like Black Panther, Hercules, Black Widow, like a bunch of people that come in. Um, but yeah, there's tons of these like little battles that don't really matter. So like this Triton guy, the only thing that matters is that Harold Danvers and Wonder Man start flirting with each other, and I mean that like continues throughout the story, but also has no bearing whatsoever on what's going on. So it's a tough read because the Horvat story is so interesting, but Sprinkle, like back then, there were all these. I read the Kreese Earl War too, and a lot of this happened too, where they have to keep people interested. You can't get someone to retain a story for 8 issues. That's like what 8 months, and they're mainly for kids. So it's like what they had to sprinkle in all these like 1 issue, 2 issue stories to get people involved, like get them to keep picking up. As like, oh, this one has Ultron, I'll read it, but it's sprinkling this Horvat story as you go along. So a lot of people are disappearing, right? And eventually they pick up the Sentinel and know where the people are being disappeared off to. So before I reveal that, sorry for that's how you read this book. It's a lot of like, oh, they know. But hold on, let me tell you something first. All right. So you find out that the enemy's name is Michael, which is even funnier. He has a total normal white guy name. He's so powerful he can like literally watch the Watcher. He's watching Odin and Zeus and Mephisto without them being aware. That's how powerful he is. He's afraid though that these people are going to stop his grand plan. And his grand plan is to basically take over the universe and shape it to his will, right? And you find out why a little bit later. But this is causing some distress with Harina, his new wife or whatever. And she enters her bed chamber sobbing because he's like, "Yo, woman, you gotta leave me alone. Like, I am dealing with some crazy fucking shit. Literally, eternity itself could become aware of my existence and it'll stop my plan, right? So you need to like sort of just leave me alone and let me do my damn job, right?" So she goes in the bedroom crying, and next thing you know, like she starts turning into cosmic energy, and she's like literally like has the power cosmic as well. And you don't know why, it just sort of hints to you that this is a thing that she could do. And in that moment, uh what's it called? Michael realizes that she has power, and eternity like sort of notices that he exists. Not yet, not entirely, but Michael knows something is up. So he runs to her and like rips her and thinking that she's gonna betray him. But she doesn't. She says how she loves him, and she's about to reveal some giant rave secret to him. But we're going to return back to the Avengers for a second. So the Avengers eventually find out who has been collecting their heroes, the other Avengers, and it is the Collector. If you watch Marvel, you would the MCU movies. He's played by Benicio del Toro. He's never really seen as a villain. In the comics, he is a villain sometimes, and he's basically collecting heroes. There's a huge battle with the Avengers attacking him. He uses all of like different random stuff from his collection to battle them. It's a fight. It's pretty cool. But once you find out that it's Hector, you're kind of like, well, what the fuck does this have to do with the Korvac saga? You know? And he, when defeated, basically tells them like the reason he's electing people is as he can see that the universe is about to go through some shit. And he mentions Thanos, and I think it might be like I do think parts of this book leads up to the Infinity Gauntlet and Thanos quest and stuff like that. But ultimately, he just sort of says like some crazy shit's about to happen, and there is a very powerful enemy. And right before he says who the enemy is and tells the Avengers, he is literally fucking killed, like evaporated in front of the eyes of the Avengers, and they have no idea what just happened. They only know that there is an enemy pulling the strings with cosmic power. They don't even know the dude's name. So they start freaking out and they're trying to figure out like, well, are there any clues or anything? They just find like some other things that are also evaporated in Hletter's collection, and it sort of takes them a while to figure out what the fuck is even happening. They end up sort of like through their own different stuff. Like there's this, the bride of Ultron is doing some electromagnetism to try to find some stuff. You have Wanda using her powers. You have Tony, using his powers. There's a little bit of flirting between Wonder Man and Harold Danvers, and they're both like, "Yo, we need to really like be on this shit and try to figure out what's going on." While they're all searching in their own ways, we finally get the bit reveal. So Michael and Harina, like they make up, like to each other, and they decide to have sex. And both of these beings being like crazy cosmic beings that are actually like entered when they have sex. And it's kind of a weird way that they show it on the page. But when they have sex, they literally fold into each other's souls. So Michael can see that Harina actually this whole time was the daughter of the Collector who was sent in to destroy Michael. And at the moment when she was like reaching out with her cosmic energy, she was going to kill Michael and fulfill her mission, but she couldn't because it turns out she actually loves him. And this is right before Michael kills her own father. So she's kind of conflicted because she literally chose the man she loves over her father, and the man she loves killed her father. On the other side, though, Harina can now view inside Michael's soul, and you find out, dun dun dun, that Michael is Horvat. So in Thor Annual 6, like I said, like his top half, he's in this weird purple costume, and he didn't even have a bottom half. So how is he now this like godlike creature? And he was just a dude who was a living computer. So how is he beautiful? Super sexy muscles and like literally more powerful than Odin and the Watcher and Eternity itself. So it turns out he travels back in time to do that plot that the Guardians of the Galaxy were talking about, which was killing Vance as a child 1,000 years in the past. But when he teleported back into an empty ship that was owned by Atlantis. This is where shit gets even weirder. He found Galactus's computer, which contained ultimate and infinite knowledge. And to a living computer man, knowledge truly is power. So he basically downloaded the knowledge of all things in the universe, and it allowed him the knowledge to be the most powerful being in the universe. Very weird logic, but you know what? I'm gonna say it's probably true. If I knew everything in the universe, then I could know how to transform my body, or I could know how to. If you know everything, then there's nothing that is a secret to you, and you should be able to do anything, including have powers. I guess I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. It's pretty cool. It's fine with me. So also, she sees what happened in the past, how he's experimented on and turned into a living computer, and his mission although it seemed evil throughout the whole story, actually comes off like he wants to take over the universe, not to change anything or interfere with anyone, but to prevent the history that he then lived through and sort of right his wrongs of betraying the Earth or whatever planet he was, and basically stop the Badoon before they happen. Now, I think he's a little grandiose, where he's trying to take over the whole universe. He could just sort of stop one invasion from happening, but he wants to stop all invasions from ever happening and be, you know, basically put order to the chaos that is the universe that causes so much injustice. So she falls in love with him even more because he's actually not a bad guy, I guess. Um, After they're done fighting, it cuts back to the Avengers, and there's actually they're kind of all like they in their own way have all sort of found something that leads them to clues as to where they should go. But there is this really funny moment where Miss Marvel, Harold Danvers, comes in, and Hawkeye, who hasn't been here, for a while, is like, "Oh, you're just letting anyone in now? Like, what's Blondie for?" And this other chick named Moondragon, which I really like. I think she's like on the level of Doctor Strange as a sorceress. Is like, oh, I'm pretty sure that this woman with cosmic fucking powers is more useful than a guy who shoots bow and arrow. Like, shut the fuck up. Uh, and Iron Man has to stop everyone from fighting each other. Anyways, they eventually find that all the information they have gathered individually leads them to this random house in New York in the suburbs. They do eventually haul and bring back Starhawk, and it's interesting because Starhawk is like, I got nothing for you. Like, I don't know. I know everything, and I cannot tell you what's going on. But I can tell you, I think that this has nothing to do with Korvac, which we know he only thinks that because Korvac made him think that. And that's how powerful Korvac is. Because they don't have any of the money. Another thing that's really funny, and I think that these '70s Avengers are like the old Avenger stories are really funny. That get away with it is they don't have twin jets anymore. So they basically have to hijack a bus so that all of these Avengers and odds and stuff can all load onto a bus from New York City and drive the bus like 30 minutes into the suburbs so that they can confront this world-ending villain. And even when they get off the bus, like the other people, they're like, are you sure you got the right place? Like, we're just the suburbs. Like, what are you doing? And they all like knock on the door. They're like, hey, so there might be some world-ending event here. Can we come in? And Michael Horvat, who opens the door, who they don't know is Horvat yet, it's like, yeah, sure, I guess. He's trying to basically prove to them that he's completely ordinary, and they can't find anything at all. And they're about to, like, Hawkeye's giving him shit as they're gonna be sued and stuff, and giving Iron Man shit, and they're all almost about to go home when Starhawk loses it. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with all of you people? There's no one here. Like, they're all talking to and about this Michael guy, and Starhawk is the one that's like, there's no one here because he's lost his sense to see this guy, and everyone's like, oh shit, it's about to go down. And it does go down. The climax of this story is fucking nuts from the very beginning of the issue. Basically, the rest of the Guardians show up, and Horvat plays his hand, becomes the Cosmic Guardian form when he was fighting Starhawk, and turns his ceiling into a window showing the Guardian's space station and blows it up with like just a wave of his hand, and it kills Vance Astro in front of the Guardians. They lose their shit and they're like, no, no, no. I honestly thought there was going to be some like, oh, he ended up getting away. No, he kills him. And then the other Guardians attack, and he fun kills them too. Quicksilver attacks like from behind, and he turns around and he kills Quicksilver like it's nothing. And that's how like sort of the rest of the story starts going. He just starts killing a ton of the Avengers like it's nothing, right? At one point, I think like they say like, oh, grab the girl. Like the Avengers say like, oh, grab his wife, Harina, which they don't know who she is, right? And she puts up like no defense whatsoever when Yellow Jacket grabs her, but it pisses Horvat off and he kills Hank Pym. And he starts getting really aggressive. He kills Hawkeye and Miss Marvel tries flying in, and he's even like he's faster than anyone else there. So he kills Miss Marvel. It's just a total bloodbath. And when almost everyone is there's this awesome page where almost everyone is defeated or killed or at the very least not down. Hampton America is the only one left standing. And Horvat and becomes his like physical normal human body again. And and like reminder, at this point, Steve Rogers does not have his super serum, so he's just a normal guy, and he starts fighting him, and he's like, "Oh, are you gonna drop your yard because I'm the only one left, or is it because I'm only a man? You don't think that a god like you? I'm not even a Superman. I'm just a man, and you think that you don't have to stop yourself?" And he ends up starting to actually like punch him and hurt him, and he's like, "You overblown, self righteous, self proclaimed deity who casually commits mass murder. No more might. This man won't let you." And Mike, of course, breaks his arm, throws him through a wall, and kills Captain America. But it was just such a cool. He even says something. Like he's like, "Oh, you know what? You're not gonna win, but you alone have managed to hurt me, so you have my respect." After he then murders him. And then shit gets crazy. Whoever's left, like Wonder Man, who's super powerful, Thor, whoever's around left anymore, then Vision also, they all attack him at the same time. And it actually does weaken him. And for just a second, he looks over at his woman, Harina, and in that moment, Harina hesitates to help her man. I want to say wife and husband, but they obviously weren't married. Um, because she remembered he did kill her father, and he just dies, and you don't know why. And the like even Tony Stark's still alive at this point, and he's like, I didn't do that. Like that wasn't me. Like, did she kill him? And they immediately like sort of say something that's so Moondragon, the sorceress, the whole time is sort of staying on the wayside, and she's just sort of watching in horror, right? But so anyways, Harina then explodes and is like, "Oh, holy shit, you just killed my husband. I'm gonna fight you too." And she's the Helector's daughter, which they didn't know at the time, and she starts fighting them up too, and she's like completely full combat ready, fresh, and they're like the handful of them that aren't dead are very wary, and Thor ends up like fighting her, and Mjolnir literally like blasts her in half. Like the artwork shows her like cut in half, and she ends up dying too. And Thor's like, I didn't do that either. Like I didn't control Mjolnir to do that. And Moondragon, who's off on the side, sort of mentions what had happened is in that moment when Michael Horvat looked over at his woman and she hesitated, it killed him on the inside. And she, knowing, what had happened, she basically willed Mjolnir to kill her because she wanted to die and didn't want to win the fight. And Moondragon even goes on to say that she could sense him when he first healed like Quicksilver or whichever one was first, one of the Guardians. He was not happy. He didn't do it maliciously. He didn't. It's once this had started, there was no turning back, and it had to go the full way for it to like be done. But in his mind, he truly did think that he was doing the right thing because he was trying to correct injustices. And on this day, she even like walks away saying, "And on this day, the Avengers will think will be seen as heroes preventing uh the villain, but." they're really the villains because this man only wanted to actually do uh good, and you prevented him from doing that, and now the world will still continue to be in chaos. And in his last breath, that moment when he died, he brought everyone back to life that he had killed, like Captain America and the Guardians and everyone. He had brought them all back to life with his final second of life. So is he really that bad of a guy? As he did have regret, and he did basically give up his life to right the wrongs that he had just committed. So there's an epilogue, and actually they bury Michael and Harina Horvat in some random graveyard, and they do have a conversation, the Avengers, on whether or not it was right or wrong. Like Thor brings up like what Lady Moondragon said. Hercules is there, and he sort of makes a comment that any mortal who thinks that he can control chaos is crazy, as that's not how it works. Even Captain America even does say something along the lines of, you know, who else thought that they could rule the world in, in order to bring about order? Hitler. So even if someone thinks that they're in the right, that doesn't mean they're in the right. And they all sort of walk away from the graveyard. Moondragon comes back though, and is thinking to herself above their grave that, she looked into the future and looked into Horvat's heart, and she knows, even though no one will admit it, Michael was right. And every terrible thing that happens in the universe after this, like every single major event in the Marvel universe, could have been any death or any major tragedy could have been prevented by Michael if the Avengers would have just let him. And it sort of has this one page where there is in the Marvel universe a Lord of Chaos and a Master of Order, and it does sort of indicate that Michael, like that, the Master of Order was kind of helping Michael get that power to give order to the universe, and it was order and chaos sort of fighting each other, and the Grim Reaper was the one who stepped in, like the physical embodiment of death in the Marvel universe, was the one who stepped in and sort of put a stop to it. And she is the one who healed Michael and Harina, because that's just where it had to go to stop Master Order and Lord Chaos from fighting each other and manipulating. But it's sort of left open, and there's not really a definitive answer as to what happened. So, anyways, that is the Horvat saga. Like I said, there was a lot of weirdness in the beginning, and it didn't really, there was a lot of side stories. But in the end, that final battle was so fucking crazy, and the awesome ambiguity of, are the Avengers in the right, even, or are they just crazy and killing people who could serve the better good? It is really fascinating to have that conversation in one of these Avengers books. It's not often seen in comic books, and I understand why, even though it's horny and weird sometimes, uh, why this is on like the top 10 of a lot of people's greatest Avengers stories. There has never been a Horvat that I've ever seen in any stories in the future. I don't know if there's ever a follow up to this. Like I said, it does sort of set up with death and some of the cosmic stuff where Infinity Gauntlet eventually does go, but I'm not sure if there ever was a sequel to Michael Horvat or Karina Horvat. As far as like in movies or anything like that, I also don't think that that's ever been done. I don't see any instance where it would be brought up. Maybe like a phase 4 type thing. I would love to see it though. I would love, if it was done the same way. I would love to see that in some sort of story. But as it is right now, if you really like the story, you're just gonna have to read it. If you made it this far, you've probably listened to most of it, and I hope that I've hooked you and you can buy the issues and check out the awesome cosmic battles that Michael Horvat does to the Avengers. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and I will chat you guys next time. Peace out.